So greetings and welcome to today's educational program, Leadership for Organizational Excellence. This is your moderator, Doug Wood, and this talk is being brought to you by ASQ's Quality Management Division and also the Education Division. Today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Dr. Yvonne Simmons Howze. Please join me in welcoming her. Dr. Yvonne Simmons Howze owns CYA Consulting Group Incorporated, headquartered in St. Augustine, Florida. She's an executive coach and master trainer whose claim to fame is helping people help themselves. Yvonne's earned her doctorate from Vanderbilt University. She's a Kellogg National Leadership Fellow, a Society of Research Fellow, and an Education Policy Fellow. She's a certified Gallup Strength Coach and an ASQ Certified Manager of Quality and Organizational Excellence. Yvonne is a senior member of ASQ, has presented at the World Conference in Quality Improvement, and serves on the ASQ Leadership Content Committee. She's also a member of the ASQ Austin section. She worked as the Director of Quality and Performance Excellence and Master Trainer of Engineering Operations for the Texas Department of Transportation. Also, she was the Director of Quality and Performance Excellence at Oklahoma Primary Care Association in Oklahoma City. She is often an invited speaker for conferences, and her presentations are fun. She's traveled worldwide studying and presenting on leadership and organizational excellence. She's written several blogs, articles, and books on these two intersecting topics. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Yvonne Simmons Howze. So, Yvonne, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug. I hope everyone can hear me. I thank you for joining me. We're going to greatness tonight. That's my plan. That should be your plan. So if that's not your plan, you're on the wrong plane. Like they tell you on the at the airline, you can get off now because that's where we're headed. So I've been troubled by or struggling with how I would start this presentation. And I talked to a couple of friends and they all just said, just dive in, girl, just dive in. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to rock and roll. Let's just go. Okay, so what in the world does leadership have to do with quality? I've been asked that question so many times, and this is my answer: everything. But leadership is hard work. And you will hear me say that throughout this presentation. It is hard work. There are a lot of competencies you have to acquire. There's a lot of skills that you're expected to have. On a day-to-day, you're expected to put out fires along with that manager, along with staff. I mean, so it becomes very much overwhelming. Here are the learning objectives for this evening. Describe a systems thinking framework for organizational excellence and understand how leadership fits into it. So I'll be sharing with you 3 different frameworks along with the one that I created in 2007. I'll also share the ASQ Body of Knowledge, and then just briefly the Malcolm Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework. Understand the differences between leader and leadership, managing change versus leading change, and ways to contribute, not inhibit, organizational and personal success. We'll be talking about distinctions between some of these terms. Utilize and apply creative and technical tools to ensure organizational excellence results. And I will introduce several tools this evening that you can try out. But I just don't show up anywhere if I can't laugh out loud and have fun. So I hope that you will enjoy this presentation and that something will spark you to laugh or go back into your office tomorrow or virtually, however you're communicating with your staff or with your colleagues, and just think about how your attitude increases their opportunity for fun. Okay, so my communication flow. And this is how I'm going to lay out the presentation for this evening. First of all, we're going to talk about definitions and distinctions so that we have a shared understanding. Then I'll talk about problems. We'll discuss the problems, and there'll be both science-based and my professional observations, because I've been around for a long time, you know. And then also share solutions, simple tools and their application. And then a call to action, what you can and need to do. So those are the 4 areas in terms of the flow of this presentation. Let's start with definitions and distinctions and our shared understanding. Excellence means the very best. That equals greatness. And I already said to you, we're going to greatness this evening. Greatness is quality, though, and I'm very passionate about quality. But quality demands leadership, and that's what it's going to take. So here's the ASQ Body of Knowledge. We call it the QBOC. There are 4 elements to it: pursuit of personal excellence, pursuit of operational excellence, pursuit of organizational excellence, and pursuit of the quality ideal. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those in the next slide. All right, so the systems thinking framework that I created and have been using since 2007 was really developed because there was so much information out there about quality, about systems thinking, about performance excellence, continuous quality improvement, and people would get confused and they just feel overwhelmed. There was just so much. So what I figured out was we need to break this down into some simple terms and categories that people can understand. So you can see my first one is leadership / followership, because leaders, when we think of leaders, we think of other people. When we think of other people, we think of followers. So you can see there personal mastery, which ties to the leadership of the ASQ. It aligns with that. And professional development, that's the talent development. Under ASQ, I want to go back a little bit and just show you. Okay, so anything that's in blue is pursuit of personal excellence. And then the things that are in purple are pursuit of organizational excellence. All right, so you've got leadership, you've got strategic planning, you've got teams, you have infrastructure, which I love. And you match that against the systems thinking framework, and you can see that it parallels. Also, here's the Baldrige criteria in terms of performance excellence. And that framework is from the 2023-2024. There's a new set of requirements and criteria that have come out. And if you're not familiar with the Baldrige, perhaps you should go to NIST, N-I-S-T. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It is a governmental entity that oversees and makes sure that the Baldrige criteria and performance excellence is administered. Again, you can see on the ASQ QBOC, leadership is first, just like in the Baldrige, which category 1. Category 2, strategic planning, strategy. In the Baldrige, it used to be called planning. And you can just see how all of this relates. Now, in the Baldrige, you've got the categories are scored by points. And the largest category that gets the most points is results. And I think it's like 450 points if you were going after the Baldrige in terms of submitting an application to be considered for that award. Okay, but the second largest is leadership, which is 150 points, and 65 points of that 115, I'm sorry, it's 115. 65 points of that 115 is tied to senior leadership. Okay, so again, leadership is just a big thing within all the system thinking processes, within all of the frameworks that people are coming up with. And so that's why I wanted to present this information to you tonight, because it has really started to take hold in a big way. All right, but you can't get good data. You can't improve processes. You can't achieve excellence if you have poor leadership skills. So what are we going to do about that? First of all, we have to have our own definition of leadership. So I challenge you to think about, do you have a definition of leadership? If it is, maybe you can put that in the chat and let other people see what it is. Or you can write it on a sheet of paper. Or if you don't have your own definition, you can start thinking about, what do you consider to be leadership? And while you're thinking about that or writing about that, I don't know what's happening with my slides here. I explained to Doug, this computer is just doing its own thing tonight. But anyway, you can put it in the chat, or you can just put it on a sheet of paper, and we will be talking about other people's definitions of leadership. The first one comes from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Leadership is getting good things done with the help of others. That's one of my favorite definitions. I'm the Kellogg Fellow, and in 1995, I was introduced to this definition. And that's the one that I've held on to the longest. Leadership is inspiring others to greatness. Again, others. Look at that one. Helping others, inspiring others. Leadership is directing and managing a project, group of people, again, others, or an organization. That's directly from ASQ's Quality Resources for 2023. And then, of course, I couldn't resist. I had to ask ChatGPT, what is your definition of leadership? And again, it comes back as the ability to guide and inspire others toward a common goal or vision. So again, others becomes the very important word. The three attributes of effective leaders: conceptualization, seeing the big picture; interpersonal, building relationships; technical, specialized skills. Now, when I think of conceptualization and seeing the big picture, I think of that 30-foot view. I think someone in ASQ talks about being asked by his supervisor to consider the 30-foot view. Well, when I think of that, I tell this story. There's a little boy and his father who are in San Francisco, and they are going to the San Francisco 49ers football game because that's their favorite team, and they're all dressed up and they've got their refreshments. The father's got these tickets, and he got them at the last minute because they're from out of town, and he saw that they were playing and he wanted to go to the game. So he bought the tickets. When they get to the stadium and they're climbing, they just keep going up and up, and the little boy's just looking all around, and the father keeps apologizing and saying things like, "I'm so sorry, son, I didn't know these seats were way up here." They keep climbing and they keep climbing, and he keeps apologizing. The little boy keeps looking all around. All right, so they finally get to their seats, and the father makes one last apology and says, "Son, I'm so sorry that these tickets are in the nosebleed section." And the little boy says, "Oh, it's okay, Dad, because I can see what the blimp sees." That's conceptualization. That's the big picture. We can't just look in, as a leader, we just can't look inside of our little empire and our little fiefdom or our little enterprise. We have to look across the entire organization so that we're not changing one thing over here that causes another thing to not work as well, because we know that in quality as tampering. So we don't want to tamper. We have to have a complete understanding across the entire board. The interpersonal skills that I'll be talking about more of in this in this talk is building relationships, because we've got to do that, and we've got to do it in such a way that people feel important within the jobs, not feel as though they've been left out or not involved. And then all of us bring these specialized skills, these technical skills that no one can take away from us. We've all been trained in something, whether it's statistics or process improvement or project management or in healthcare, whatever it is, engineering, we all have technical skills. So these are the three attributes. Leaders must have a spectrum of skills and abilities, and they must be able to move from hoarding. And I'm not just talking about piling things on your desk or in your office. I'm talking about withholding information that's critical for other people to know. And then we have to, again, building relationships. You want to build that connectivity with people across the organization. And then avoiding responsibility. How many people have you heard say, that's not my job. It doesn't involve me, or, let somebody else handle that. We have to leverage that capacity. There are a lot of people out there, like we've already said, who have a lot of skills that can really help us as leaders. And how do we leverage that so that they feel as though they're a part of our work and trying to get to organizational excellence? And then finally, limited action. I usually refer to that as sticking your head in the basement or going to the basement, where, you're just there and you're not functioning. You're just waiting for somebody else to rescue you, so to speak. And then instead of a mission-focused strategy. So we, as leaders, we need to be thinking, if we're talking about organizational excellence, we need to have a mission, we need to have a vision, we need to move forward with the strategy, plan it out, map it out, whatever it takes, so that we can build our capacity to do good work and to produce more. So hoarding, no. Avoiding responsibility, no. Limited action, no. Building connectivity, yes. Leveraging capacity, yes. Mission-focused strategy, yes. That. All right, so here are the critical leadership competencies, and this comes from the Society of Human Resource Management. If you don't know the Society of Human Resource Management and you're a manager, you're a leader, you're in a key leadership role, you need to source that out and perhaps go to their website and get additional information, because they have wonderful articles about employees and employee activities and initiatives that you can be engaged in. You also have the Gallup as another resource, and of course the state of California in 2017 did us all a great job by putting together leadership competencies. But you can see here articulation skills, data analytics, written communication. There are 12 of those things that are out there that are competencies. And this is why I say leadership is hard work. You got to be concerned about all these different things: analytical thinking, planning and organizing. All right. And you also have creativity and innovation that I've come up with since it wasn't in the list. And then, of course, ASQ and technology and digitalization. So if you've got to have all of these in your repertoire, then you're going to be tired. So, that's what it requires: perseverance and a lot of energy. All right, so people ask me this because we're still talking about definitions and distinctions, leader versus manager. And I don't see it as leader versus manager. I see it as leader and manager, because leadership is situational. It's just like if the fire alarm goes off and you're sitting in your office, you're not going to run down the hall and ask your supervisor, "Can I leave the building?" No, you might end up being a crispy critter, so you don't want to do that. You want to get out of the building, right? And at that point in time, you took a leadership role, made a leadership decision, and got out of the building. All right, so that's how that situation caused you to assume a leadership role. So why do we have to have a crisis in order to assume a leadership role? We don't. Leadership and leaders are not quite the same in terms of how we should be thinking about it. But a leader sets the direction, inspires, and develops people. They identify future business needs. Managers are setting those expectations and holding employees accountable, and they problem solve, giving employees the authority, knowledge, and skills to do their jobs. Managers typically are assigning tasks and managing processes. And then finally, this comes from ASQ as well, in the ASQ quality progress management versus leadership article, that says a leader focuses on doing the right things, and the manager focuses on doing things right. And that's why you need both sets of skills. There will be times, like I said, when you will be a follower, and then there are times when you will be a leader. There will be times when you will need to manage that organization, and there are times when you will need to lead that organization. So it's not an or, it's an and. And so that's just my thinking. But here's the definition that I really like. It's from Stephen Covey, and it's the definition of a leader. Now, we've talked about different definitions of leadership, right? So now here's my favorite definition of leader. Stephen Covey says a leader is the person who climbs the tallest tree in the land, or in the jungle in this case, and they survey the land. And then they holler, "Wrong jungle." Sometimes that's what we need to do as leaders. And so often we don't. We just keep doing the same things, even when we know perhaps they're not working as well as they could, or not working at all. Somebody has to have enough courage, enough charisma, enough whatever to say, "Wrong jungle." And I love that definition. All right, so now we've talked about definitions and distinctions. Let's talk about some of the problems that are out there. And these are science-based, again, and professional observations that I've had. All right, this comes from the Gallup State of the Global Workplace 2023 report, representing 160 countries with respondents from 2009 to 2022 of over 2 million people. And then for just 2022, which is the last year, that, of course, that they collected this information, 122,416 respondents. So this is not just Mickey Mouse. This is big time. This is a big deal. All right, so here you go. This is what they found. That from 2009 to 2022, you had this positive trend right up until 2020. You know, in 2020, of course, we went through the pandemic and we had some difficulties there. So engagement was down, and then started to rise again in 2021 and rose all the way to 23% engaged, which, by the way, if you look, is the highest it's ever been. So this is a record number of people engaged, 23% from 2009. That means that if they're engaged, they're thriving at work. For US and Canada, that number together, because the report is based on regions, so you had 31% with US and Canada, with US coming in at 34%, if I recall, and Canada coming in at 28%. For that mean number of 31%. So work is meaningful for 23% of 122,000 plus people. All right, so, but this is dismal, because we've got 59% of that workforce who's saying, you know, they don't know what to do, or they don't know why they matter, or what they do matters, or in other words, what they're doing is sitting there at the job, and they're physically there, but they're not psychologically there. So they're not engaged. That's 6 out of 10 people. That's dismal to me. But anyway, and then we've got this actively disengaged group, loud quitting. So the first group is quiet quitting. They're there, but they don't necessarily want to be there, and they're not, you know, making a big deal about it, but they do show up. And then we've got people who are leaving or thinking about leaving. They're actively pursuing other employment. So that's 18%. If you put those two numbers together, you're looking at 77%. That's almost 80% of the workforce who are not engaged. All right. And then Gallup asked this question. Based on the day before they took the survey, what were your negative emotions? And 44% of that population said stress, and 21% said anger. Okay, so you have people at work who are stressed out and they're mad. And then you've got 51% of that total workforce that's got intent to leave, and it's regardless of whether they're fully remote, whether they're hybrid, or whether they're on site. 51% have intentions to leave. So the next question was, what would you change about the workplace to make it better? And what they said was engagement or culture. 41% of the people said if you can change the opportunities for me to be engaged, and if you can change the culture that has been created, perhaps that will make it better. And then, we always think if we pay more money to people, they'll stay or they'll feel better about their work. And that is to some degree true. 28% pay and benefits think that the workplace would be better if there was an increase in pay or if the pay was, satisfactory. And then here, a whopping 16% with regard to well-being. And if you drill down on the report, it shows that one of the main reasons people feel as though their employer doesn't feel as though they care about them is because they don't provide them with the opportunities to develop. So lack of development here, pay and benefits is significant, but the biggest is this engagement of culture. So we're going to be talking about that because I think that's where, when we talk about organizational excellence, we're going to have to put some of our attention to. So what is engagement? Employees are involved in, excited about, and committed to their work and their workplace. They know what to do, they have what they need, and they have a supportive team. Now, I wrote a paper in 2013, another one in 2014, and the first one I was trying to submit for a presentation at the World Conference, didn't get approved. The second one I submitted to the Texas Department of Transportation, and the engineers there really embraced it and started trying to make some changes within the ranks. So I know it works. If you can engage people and have them feel good about the work that they do and the work environment they're in, you will get more productivity. I'm the living proof of that. I've had staff that work with me and they would tell you the same. All right, but if we're doing this, the organizational chart was created in 1928 by Alfred Sloan. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that was like 95 years ago. All right, so are we still using this? This is how we're engaging people, where the man at the top has a hat and a head, the people underneath him have a hat and a head, and then down here we have people with no hat, no head, but notice that they have breasts, some of them have breasts and high heels. Let's not do business as usual. If this is the way it's looking right now, I challenge you to think about how else it could look to make it better so that people feel engaged. Then what is culture? Culture is what works best for your organization, your shared beliefs, your values, your customs, and your behaviors, your organization's way of life. Okay, now that comes from the SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management. But down here, it comes from ASQ, Tim King. I don't know if you're out there, but quality matters. How an organization relates internally and externally, its values and rules. How power is shared. Okay, so the culture, if we're looking at it like this, where people are blaming each other, then that's not very engaging. And right here, this is one of my favorite cartoons also, because you see the little boy's blaming the mother's blaming the teacher's blaming the little boy, and it just goes around and around and around. And we do that sometimes at work. So I challenge you to think, when you go back in or you're having a staff meeting, you have somebody point at you and then point at somebody else in the room and then point at themselves and see how many of those fingers actually come back. Now, some of you are familiar with that little technique. But we have to start here. When we start with leadership, we have to do a personal assessment. We have to ask ourselves, are we an inhibitor or are we a contributor? And sometimes I'll just go a step further and say to myself, am I the chief knucklehead? People talk about chief, the COO and the CEO, but am I the CFK, the chief knucklehead? I would hope not. I try not to be. All right. So, but anyway, blaming. We need to get away from that. And then I love this, because an important aspect of work culture is communication. So here's how sometimes we do it. Hi, I'm Jerry, the motivational speaker. So rah, rah, rah. Let's get back to work. I don't want to waste any time trying to pull together a team. I don't want to waste any time talking to you. I don't want to share or deploy. You know, if you're talking about the Baldrige, it's very interesting because they talk about it from the how, which is the approach. You talk about it from the results. You know, what outcomes do you want? But that thing in the middle where we're deploying and sharing and bringing people along, and now Baldrige also has learning as one of those categories in between the approach and the results. We've got all these opportunities to bring people together and to encourage them to work with each other. All right, so what? I've given you all this. I've given you definitions. I've given you distinctions. I've given you the problems. Okay, so what? How will you make a U-turn? Will you be a contributor or an inhibitor? So let's talk about some of the solutions that are possible. These are simple tools in their application. These are the ones that I've used in my work over the years. These are ones that I know are tried and true that you can try yourself. So let's go. The basic principles of a culture of quality. This came up also in the discussion of ASQ in the discussion area. What is the culture of quality? The culture of quality for me and for other gurus out there that I've read about, it at least has these three elements: systematic and ongoing effort. It's not a one and done. If you're running a survey, if you're doing process improvement, you're not going to do it this one time and then just sit it on the shelf somewhere. You're doing strategic planning. It's an ongoing process. And then scientific, all of us feed into this at ASQ, I know, where we have data collected, analyzed, reported, but sometimes we don't manage that data. Sometimes we don't use it, we don't apply it, and therefore we don't make good decisions. But what good is the data to you if you're not going to use it? What good is the data to you if you're not using it to solve problems? What good is the data to you as a leader if you're not using it to make good decisions? And then finally, the third element is everybody involved. Okay, so that's back to engagement. How do you bring people along? Everybody involved. All right. Dimming. It is not enough to work hard. You must know what to work on. So here's some things to work on. Leaders must articulate a clear vision and stay focused on the organizational mission. Make an intentional effort to communicate, not a rah, get back to work, but a true effort to say, I want to hear what you have to offer. Use words to get buy-in and improve performance. From the Harvard Management Academy, they're suggesting that you use could instead of should, because when you say should, it's almost like telling you what to do, and it's usually ending up in an or situation. You could do this, or you should do this or that. Whereas with could, it opens the door for lots of possibilities. So when you're doing this intentional communication, you want to use words that people can embrace and really feel as though you're actually true to form, interested in what they have to offer. So could. And then my favorite airline, which I won't mention here, but I like flying them because they do just that. If the plane is late, if it has a mechanical problem, whatever the delay is, they tell you why. It's because the plane is delayed because. Okay, so and telling people why. I mean, in one of the studies that I was reading, I think it was Cialdi's book, but he talks about where if you're standing in line, you got a line of people and they're trying to use the copier, for example. If a person comes in and says, I have to make these copies, can I skip the line? 64% of the people might say okay. But if you come in and you say, I need to make these copies, can I skip the line because I've got to be in a meeting in 10 minutes, then 93 to 94% would allow you to skip the line because you told them why. That, you know, and it even showed, like, even if you just say something like, I need to make these copies because I need to make copies, they'll still allow you to go, even though everybody's standing in line to make the copies. Just by telling why seems to have a significant impact on whether or not you'll get cooperation. So we want to make sure that we're using could, we're using because, and then together, having us work together, not just as a member of the team, but together on the team. It seems to increase, or the research shows that it increases productivity, it increases time on task, it increases collaboration. So using those three words gets us buy-in and it improves performance. We all want that. And then leaders must recognize that whether you have success or failure, it is still your fault. Don't you just love that? It is still your fault. That's direct quote from Stephen Jobs. Recognize that whether you have success or failure, as a leader, it is still your fault. Okay, so you don't get a chance to stick your head in the sand. You can't avoid the responsibility. You're going to have to stand firm and accept what comes. And when you're successful, you want to high five yourself. I high five myself all the time. I fist bump myself. I pat myself on the back because sometimes other people don't recognize how great you really are. And all of us are great in our own way. We need to be our own border champion, not our own border bully. And so when we make a mistake, we have to own it. When we do well, we have to own it. Involve others, there's that magic word again, in the improvement process, internal and external customers. This is not just saying, okay, what do you want us to do? And asking them for that feedback, but rather engaging them in a process that allows them to give us feedback in a way that we can really use it and for improvement processes. And then focus on your most winnable employees. There's a continuum. You've got some people on the end of the continuum, they're giving you 100, 125, 150 every day. On the other end of the continuum, you've got people who are saying, oh, I don't even want to be here. And they're naysayers. And we're spending, as leaders, so much time trying to convince them that this is a wonderful place to work and, that they're valuable or whatever. I'm not saying you can't do that. What I'm saying is, what about those people in the middle who haven't gone to the left or the right? Those are your winnable employees. If you can communicate with them in such a way that makes them feel engaged, then you can pull them over to the side of the continuum where you've got 120, 125% work happening. All right. And then listen, if you don't have any other thing that you get out of this presentation or this talk tonight, that's the number one word you need to know. Listen. Mark Twain talks about having 2 ears and only 1 mouth. And that's for a reason. We need to listen twice as much as we talk. There are just times when we don't need to say anything. And that's why I have these buttons up here. I take a button everywhere I go. I keep it in my purse. I keep one in my purse. I have one in my suitcase. I have one in my backpack. And it's to remind me to button my lip. Okay, and whenever I feel like I need to say something, sometimes I just have to squeeze my button. So that's what you need. Find you some buttons and keep them on you, because sometimes leaders do not need to talk. When people drop by your office or they're online with you talking through the virtual process, they don't necessarily want to hear you talking. They want you to listen to them talking. So how are your listening skills? There are listening inventories out there you can take. I actually have one if anybody wants to connect with me and get it. All right. And also to learn. We're lifelong learners. My father used to sit on the bed. I had twin beds in my room when I was growing up as a teenager. He would sit on one side and he'd sit on one bed, I'd sit on the other. And then every time he tried to say something to me, I would start to talk. And he would say, well, you can't listen and talk at the same time. I need you to learn from this experience, And I would say, well, I just wish you'd spank me. I don't want to listen and I don't want to learn. But anyway, recognize and appreciate people's talents. You got to say thank you. You got to say beyond thank you. Recognition for me is saying it publicly. Marilyn, you did an outstanding job. and privately. Marilyn, here's a note for you, that recognize, and I say in this note that you did an outstanding job, but in a meeting, there's ways to get people to engage. And one of the things that I've used that works really well is a little cheer that I will teach you tonight. And it goes like this: GOODJOB, good job, good job. GOODJOB, good job, good job. Try it. It makes you smile. It makes people laugh. And we need to laugh a lot. Leaders need to laugh a lot, because back to that anger, back to the stress, we need to be able to reduce that. Laughter helps with that. It doesn't mean you have to have a stand-up comedy show, but there's something at work you can find that's funny every day. I'm sure you can, and if you can't, go to Reader's Digest. They have all kinds of little jokes. Or send a note to me and I'll send you a joke. All right, give employees a twofer. This is my own personal observation here. We need a better leader and a better manager. We need both. So I'm just saying, employees are expecting both. They want both. When you've got the manager, there's something now, I think it came from Gallup earlier this month, actually, and it's called the manager squeeze. And it's where the leader and the employee have expectations of that manager, and they put them in the middle and they're squeezing them. So it causes burnout. Your managers, if you're in an organization where you've got managers that are about, doing that 120, even if they're doing 85 at this point, because they've taken on more responsibilities because of whatever, they need the recognition and appreciation, but you also need to be aware that they may be getting burned out. So burnout is a serious thing. It's not just work-life balance. People get that confused. It's not just work-life balance. It is work. And we've got to find ways to help people feel better at work. All right, so we talk about solutions. That's where we are. All of you know this PDSA, cycle of continuous improvement. I'm pretty sure just about 99.9% of the people on this call know about the PDSA. This is how I set it up, though. So conceptually, I know my statisticians are having a fit. 50%, all of this is going to equal 100. That's true. But I'm not saying you divide your day into 50%, 10%, 30% like that. But I am saying conceptually, think about how much time are you spending on planning. You want to assess your current situation. You want to establish preliminary goals. You want to set the strategic direction. And then you want to do it on a small scale. You want to study the results, and then you want to act. If you go this way, you're going to have a lot more success than if you go this way. Because if you start with act, you're probably going to cause confusion. Okay. And then there's the SWOT that is a solution for you. Also, strengths, what's working, what's not working, what opportunities do we have, and who or what would hinder us. If you're not using your SWOT, I like the SPOT. I like problems rather than weakness. But if you're not using it, then we need to, because you can certainly get in the trenches and engage your staff in a conversation to talk about what's working and what's not working. Oh, let me go back. All right. So for every problem that you identify, you want to identify an opportunity as well. That's the other thing I was going to say. All right. And then the next one is the 4 Ps of effective communication. Saying to people, here's the purpose, why we have to do this. Saying to people, here's the picture, what it's going to look and feel like when we reach our goal. Saying to people, plan, here's the step by step, how we're going to get there. Here's the part you can and need to do to help us move forward. And then the communication planner, which is a tool that I created, I don't know, in 2007 or something, maybe even before that. When I'm finished, my listener will what? We go into too many of these meetings unprepared. We go in and we talk about the weather. We go in and we talk about other things, and we never get our message across, which needs to be said 3 times. We never get out, we never open up with what we are there for. We talk about everything except, and then the person's phone rings, or somebody else stops by, or they have to go to another call, Zoom meeting, or whatever the case is, and you never get a chance to state your case. Also, in this communication planner, you want to have a closing. Ask for a follow-up. Never leave a meeting unless you've got a follow-up question or follow-up opportunity, and try and schedule something. Will we get back together in 2 weeks? Do you want me to touch base with you in a couple of days? Whatever it's going to be. And then the last part, the last solution I would offer to you, all of these, well, I'll tell you in a minute. Teaming process, I highly recommend, if you're not using a team charter, you should be. Team roles and responsibilities is something that I created that I'm definitely going to share with you. And the team evaluation tools. Very simple tool is a plus delta. You just say, you know, what did you like about the meeting? What changes do you recommend for improvement? I wish. So you do I liked, I wish. Very simple tool. At the end of each meeting, you need to be evaluating how well your meeting went. And then this one is what I call a 3-statement evaluation. And you just go around the room as a round robin. I've got issues, and we're not talking about your own personal issues, because you know people got issues and they want to tell you about them. I'm talking about what issues do you have as a result of the meeting that we just had. And then I'm cool, or I'm all that. And they say one of those statements in the round robin. All right, so here's the learning objectives. Describe a systems thinking framework. We talked about that. And how leadership fits into it. We talked about that. We talked about the framework for the ASQ Body of Knowledge and the Malcolm Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework. We talked about the differences between leader and leadership. We didn't hone down on a lot of it, but we got some things out there. Food for thought. That's all I'm trying to create tonight. Utilize and apply creative and technical tools. I introduced 5 tools that you can do tomorrow morning, starting with the PDSA though. Make sure you start there, and then laugh out loud and have fun. I hope that at least something I said made you laugh. And then call to action, what you can and need to do. All right, so this is very simple. In the next 7 days, I will what? What will you do with this information that I've shared tonight? What will you do in the next 7 days? I'm going to tell you how to get all of these tools, but when you get it, I want you to sign your name, date it, and then I want you to find an accountability partner who's going to hold you accountable to the next 7 days and what you say you're going to do. Now, I have written this book, but I also have, and it's a good book. For people who are new to quality, especially, it's a great resource. People in human resource management, it's a great resource. People who have been in quality for a long time, they can, go use it also to validate what they're doing and just as a refresher. And then the companion handbook will be coming out. That's the companion handbook to that. It's nothing but a group of creative tools that I've used over the years that I put in a book. That'll hit the streets on October 1st or before. And then finally, this is how you can reach me. And what I want you to do, if you can go here to this website, and there's going to be a free download starting at 7:01 tonight. You can download it off of my website, and you can get a copy of all of the tools that I mentioned in this presentation. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But here's one of my favorite sayings: the greatest waste is the failure to use the abilities of people. So go forth, use these people's abilities to get organizational excellence at its best, because you're great leaders. I know you're capable, and I'm holding you accountable from this point forward. All right, it's been my pleasure to talk with you. Doug, I'm done.
Sure. Let's pause here for a minute. Thank you. I really appreciate, your insight and your information. We've got a number of questions here.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
just like to remind people we have some upcoming webinars here. Again, we're doing a series on preparing for process analysis. 8 and 9 are coming up on October 18 and November 15. That finishes the series. December 6th, we're going to talk about quality 4.0. Can you go to the next slide?
Oh, sure.
Okay, we'd like to remind you to join ASQ. The ASQ brought you this. So remember, this is where you get good stuff. So let's do a couple of questions. If you go back to your signature or your email,
Oh, sure. Okay.
we'll ask a couple of questions here. So, we had a couple, you talk about leadership. And one of them was, how far does leadership category extend? I tend to focus just on the facility I'm managing, but we are part of a massive organization. So how far do you need to expand to cover your confidence in leadership? What do you think about that for these giant companies?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but what I will tell you is the first order of business under leadership is going to be personal mastery.
Mm.
How do you, what you're bringing to the table? What are your talents? So you have, what I've seen in large corporations, I won't name a few, but is that they use a self-assessment of some kind. They might be using the DISC. They might be using, what's another one? Oh, the Myers-Briggs they use. Since I'm a Gallup certified coach, then the Gallup Strengths Finder is another tool, but that's where it starts. It starts personal mastery is the area where you're looking at yourself and determining what kind of skills do you have that you're bringing to the forefront. So that's first. Then next, you're looking at talent development. How much are you engaged with the other people to bring them along? To help them get better. That really helps you as a leader. And then performance expectations, and I'm sure Deming is rolling over in his grave, but performance expectations are necessary for people to know what the expectations are that you have of them to complete their work. And then finally, you've got civic engagement and responsibility. So you've got a big challenge that you have to just wrap your arms around, because leadership extends all throughout the organization. I don't see it as just at the top of the heap. Everybody within the organization leads somebody. That's how I see it. Leadership, if you're a leader, you're leading somebody. So I see it as extending throughout the entire organization.
I think you've answered one of the other questions. Is leadership the domain of one person, or is it a collective process? And I think you've said it's a collective process, right?
It is a collective process, yes.
Okay. Another large company question. What can you do when you're part of a large corporation where corporate values conflict with local values? It's more or less that corporate is sort of disconnected off of what is truly valuable. And this inhibits what works best at a local level. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, remember when I was saying, you're pointing, at other people and you have to point at yourself? It takes courage to walk into a CEO's office or to talk with the CEO perhaps about a concern or an issue that you may have. But as a leader yourself, that's what is expected. So that's why I created the communication planner tool. You can use that communication planner tool to come up with what it is that you need to say in such a way that you remain professional, that you get your points across with the understanding they may not ever agree with you, but at least you've stepped to the plate to say, we have this disconnect within the organization, and I really would like to spearhead a team to talk about how we can, address the issue. So each person within the organization has to assume some responsibility for whether that organization is effective, efficient, and making the kind of impact that is needed. And I have a lot of courage, so I don't expect anybody to be exactly like me. And I've had young people that have worked for me who said, but I'm scared to do that. Then what I say is find your way. Find your way to articulate, your vision and your expectations that is not intimidating, but embracing. So the communication planner will help you with that. And like I said, you can get it on the CYA Consulting Group website. And use
Wonderful.
it.
Wonderful. I got a couple more here, I think. One of them, can you explain what a team charter is?
Oh, sure. I love Team Charter. One of my favorite questions. Okay, so a team charter is developed when you're doing one of two types of teams. One is a project team. When you want to look at something that's new, let's say you want to have an employee recognition day. That's a new thing within your organization. So you charter a team to do that. Or it can be a project team, which is what I call, I'm saying a process team, because the process that you have in place isn't working. So those are the two types of teams that I see work very well for a team charter. So the team charter specifies what it is that you're going to do, who's going to be on the team, what the expectations are in terms of their authority that they've been given. It specifies what caused them to be created as a team. And then you have roles and responsibilities. You have a team leader, you have a scribe that takes notes, you have a timekeeper. Those are the minimum. And then you have the members. Well, what happens with the charter is you put all of this in black and white, and then each member of that team signs off on that charter. The charter at that point becomes your go-to document for each of your meetings. And then that is your commitment to the work of the team. That's what the charter is. It's kind of like signing off on the Declaration of Independence, so to speak. So you're committing to meet so many times at a certain place on a certain day. I always say to people when they're teaming that they don't want to meet more than 6 times, because if you got to meet more than 6 times, you're not honing in on what you're there to try and address. I'm not talking about a Kaizen blitz where you're doing, 3 hours or 3 days or whatever. I'm talking about structured teaming where you've got an agenda, you've got an evaluation, you've got the charter, you've got the evaluation of the team, and everybody's coming in to work together. So again, there's a team charter on the CYA Consulting Group website, and you can just download it for free.
Okay, wonderful. That was the shortest question, but the longest answer. That's great. So let's see here. I have one more, and I'm not sure. This one seems kind of a thorny one. You can answer long or short. How should leaders deal with when people have a good intent, but they're dysfunctional in mediocrity? They just can't seem to work well, and they have ineffective practices.
Okay, well, we're often outside looking in on a person without saying, exactly what it is. So sometimes you have to operationalize that. So what do you mean by, they have this or that? We have to clarify what that is. Once we clarify what it is, that the behavior that they're exhibiting that is inconsistent with what we think is appropriate, then we have to have that conversation with them. Now, me, again, I have had conversations with people that say, I've got a problem. It's you. But then I've also had meetings where I said, I want to sit down and talk to you about some things that I'm seeing and see how I can help you. And those are those individualized one-on-one meetings. Now, for my direct reports, every direct report that is reported to me over the years, I always have a 2-hour slot designated weekly for them or not. If they don't use the 2 hours, I have no obligation to them. But if I have the 2 hours and I'm scheduled, somehow I got a conflict, then I'm obligated to follow up with them, but I'll go to their space to do that. Okay, so performance, that's why I like performance expectations, because if you set the minimum expectations, then everybody knows what is expected of them. And then you can say, okay, you're not performing up to this level. And these are some things that I need to help, may need help with. And so I'm here as your mentor. I'm here as your coach. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I always have, for any direct report, I suggest to leaders, identify one goal that you can mentor somebody on. And then spend the time and energy, if they're salvageable, to help them get better. If it's not salvageable, you'll know it like within 2 or 3 meetings. But you're going to have a heart-to-heart. The communication planner, again, is primarily designed for those difficult conversations one-on-one. You have to expect that people want to know when they're not performing. We can't just assume because we don't see them performing that they actually understand that they're not. So having that conversation right off is a really good thing to do.
Okay, thank you. A couple of comments in there. They're saying you must be able to have a small team to do this. I suspect you're talking about doing it to just the difficult areas, not everybody.
No, okay, so one job I had 11 direct reports. Another job I had 17 direct reports. One job I had 7 direct reports. But I've always had more than 200, 300 people that were part of my organization. When I was working for the Department of Transportation in Texas and the Department of State Health Services, there were over 11,000 employees in each of those organizations. So we have to make it work to the benefit of the people that we are responsible to and for. So I worked a lot to try and make people feel good about being at work every day. When they slam their door to come into the building, you want people to have pep in their step. You just do. You want them to feel good. You want them to say, "Woo, man, I love my job." And I loved all of my jobs every day.
I suspect the person there was thinking maybe you spend an hour in each meeting. Well, you don't necessarily need an hour, right?
You don't.
Yeah. Okay. Let's slide forward a little bit here. We're getting close to the end. There's their kind. You're all going to get an email, which gives you your RUs for this. And we want you all to understand that we also have my ASQ as a place where you can go and continue this conversation. So feel free to use that, my ASQ. This is the Quality Management Division. There's a QR code there, which will take you there. So thank you. And Yvonne, I want to thank you for this presentation. This was marvelous.
Well, thank you.
We got so much out of it. Everybody was saying in the chat all the marvelous things that you provided us in a short time. So again, I would like to make sure